The entire town stopped breathing when Raymond Hale walked Martha Keller onto that dance floor. She was the woman they'd laughed at for years, too big, too different, too broken to deserve love. He was the rancher who could have had anyone, but on that spring night in Merritt's Crossing, Texas, he didn't just dance with her. He claimed her in front of everyone who'd ever made her feel small. What happened next tore through this frontier town like wildfire, proving that the most unexpected love story can shatter everything people think they know about worth, beauty, and belonging. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The first time Raymond Hale really saw Martha Keller, she was elbow deep in bread dough, singing something off-key that made the chickens outside her kitchen window scatter. It wasn't a pretty song. Her voice cracked on the high notes, and she forgot half the words, filling in the gaps with humming that sounded more like a wounded calf than music. But Raymond stood frozen at her fence line, one boot on the bottom rail, watching through the gap in her curtains like some kind of fool. He'd ridden out here to return a saddle blanket she'd mended for him 3 weeks back. That was the excuse anyway. The real reason, the one he wouldn't admit even to himself, was that he'd started finding reasons to pass by her farm every few days, just to see if she was outside, just to hear that laugh she only let loose when she thought nobody was listening. Martha Keller wasn't the kind of woman men in Merritt's Crossing looked at twice. Hell, most of them looked right through her, or worse, they looked at her with that particular brand of cruelty small-town people reserved for anyone who didn't fit their narrow idea of proper. She was big, not in a delicate way folks might politely ignore. She was substantial, solid, the kind of woman who took up space and couldn't hide it no matter how she tried. Her dresses strained at the seams. Her face was round and flushed from the heat of the kitchen. Her arms were thick, her hands calloused from work that would have broken softer women years ago. And the town made damn sure she knew it. Poor thing, the women at the general store would whisper, not quite quiet enough. Shame about her size. No man's gonna want to hitch himself to that. Built like a barn, the men would joke over whiskey at the saloon. Probably eat a man out of house and home. They'd been saying it for years. Ever since her father died and left her alone on that failing farm with nothing but debt, a dozen chickens, and a sewing skill that kept her fed but never comfortable. Martha had learned to make herself small in other ways. She kept her head down in town, spoke softly, never made eye contact longer than necessary. She'd built walls so high around herself that most days she forgot what it felt like to be seen as anything other than a problem, a punchline, a woman the world had decided didn't deserve tenderness. But Raymond saw something different. He saw the way she left extra biscuits on her porch for the Mexican kids who played in the creek behind her property. He saw how she'd patched up a stray dog's torn ear with the same careful stitches she used on fancy wedding dresses for women who wouldn't sit next to her in church. He saw the garden she kept behind the house, wild and overgrown, but alive with vegetables she'd grown from seeds her mother had saved before the fever took her. He saw someone who worked herself ragged every single day and still found ways to be kind in a town that had never been kind to her. And it did something to him, twisted something in his chest that he didn't quite know how to name. Raymond Hale was 34 years old, and he'd never felt this way about anyone. He'd had women before, a few brief, forgettable encounters that left him feeling emptier than before. The kind of women his ranch hands whistled at when they rode into town, pretty, thin, performative in their sweetness. They bored him senseless. All surface, no substance. They laughed at his jokes even when they weren't funny and agreed with everything he said like they didn't have thoughts of their own. But Martha would have told him to go to hell if he said something stupid. He knew it instinctively. There was steel in her, hidden under all that softness the town mistook for weakness. He wanted to know her, really know her, wanted to sit in her kitchen while she cooked and listen to her talk about things that mattered, wanted to make her laugh the way she laughed when she thought she was alone. But he didn't know how to start. So he did what any pathetic half-in-love fool would do. He started breaking things. The first time it was an old leather bridle that didn't really need fixing. He showed up at her door on a Tuesday afternoon with his hat in his hands and an apology already forming on his lips. "Miss Keller," he said when she opened the door, surprise flickering across her face. "I hate to bother you, but I heard you're fair handy with a needle, and this strap here's about to give out on me." She looked at the bridle, then at him, suspicion narrowing her eyes. "That strap's got another year in it, Mr. Hale." He blinked. Well, but I'll fix it anyway, she said, taking it from his hands before he could fumble out another lie. Give me 20 minutes. She didn't invite him in, just took the bridle and shut the door in his face. Raymond stood on her porch like an idiot, grinning. 20 minutes later, she handed it back, stitched tighter than it had been when it was new. No charge, she said flatly. I can't let you. No charge, Mr. Hale. She shut the door again. He came back the next week with a torn saddlebag. The week after that, a ripped work glove. By the fourth visit, Martha was standing on her porch with her arms crossed, glaring at him like he'd lost his mind. Mr. Hale, are you breaking these things on purpose? No, ma'am. You're a terrible liar. He smiled, couldn't help it. Maybe I just like your stitching. My stitching's the same as anyone else's. Doubt that. She stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind her eyes. Then she sighed, heavy and resigned, like she'd just made a decision she'd regret later. You want coffee or not? His heart kicked hard against his ribs. Yes, ma'am, I surely do. Her kitchen smelled like rising bread and wood smoke and something sweet he couldn't place. The table was scarred and uneven, the chairs mismatched, but it was clean. Everything was clean, the kind of clean that came from caring, from taking pride in the small things, even when the big things felt impossible. Martha poured him coffee in a chipped mug and set it down harder than necessary. I'm not stupid, Mr. Hale. Never thought you were. Then why do you keep coming here? He wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into his palms. The truth sat heavy on his tongue, but he wasn't ready to let it out. Not yet. Not when she was looking at him like he might be playing some kind of cruel joke. Maybe I like the company, he said quietly. She laughed. It wasn't a nice sound. Nobody likes my company. I do. You don't know me. I'd like to. She turned away from him then, busying herself at the stove, but he saw the way her shoulders tensed, saw the way her hands shook just slightly as she stirred something in a pot. People talk, Mr. Hale. You know they do. They see you coming out here. They're going to say things. Let them. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they've been laughing at since you were 16 years old. The bitterness in her voice cut him clean through. He stood up, slow and careful, and took a step toward her. Martha. She flinched at the sound of her first name. He'd never used it before. Look at me. She didn't, kept her back turned, kept stirring that pot like her life depended on it. I don't care what they say, Raymond continued, his voice low and steady. I never have. And I'm not here because I pity you, or because I've got some strange agenda you're worried about. I'm here because when I'm not here, I'm thinking about being here. And that's the truth, whether you believe it or not. She went still. For a long time, neither of them moved. The only sound was the fire crackling and the coffee pot hissing on the stove. Then so quietly he almost missed it, she said, Why? Why what? Why me? He didn't have a good answer, not one that would make sense if he said it out loud. How did you explain to someone that they'd gotten under your skin without even trying? That the way they moved through the world, stubborn and kind and tired and still fighting, made you want to fight beside them? Because you're the only person in this whole damn county who feels real, he said finally. She turned then, eyes wide and shining with something that looked dangerously close to tears. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Probably. You should go. I know. But he didn't move, and neither did she. After that, he started staying longer. At first, it was just an hour, sitting at her table while she worked on mending projects, talking about nothing important. The weather, the cattle, the new family that had moved into the old Peterson place outside town. But then the hours stretched. He'd chop wood for her while she cooked dinner, and she'd insist he stay to eat because there's too much and it'll go to waste otherwise, even though they both knew she was lying. Her cooking was incredible. Not fancy, but good. The kind of food that stuck to your ribs and made you feel like you were exactly where you were supposed to be. Cornbread that melted on your tongue. Stew thick with vegetables and meat she'd traded sewing work for. Pies that made him want to weep. You're going to spoil me, he said one night, sopping up gravy with a piece of bread. You're easy to spoil, you'd eat anything. Not true, I'm very discerning. She snorted. You ate 4 pieces of cornbread. Because it's the best cornbread in Texas. Now you're just lying. Swear to it. She rolled her eyes, but he saw the smile tugging at her lips, saw the way her cheeks flushed pink. He was falling, hard and fast and completely out of control. The town noticed, of course. They always did. You see, Hale's been spending time out at the Keller place, Mrs. Brennan said to Mrs. Yates at the Sunday service, her voice pitched just loud enough for half the congregation to hear. I did. Strange, isn't it? Very strange. He could have any girl in the county. Maybe he's just being charitable. She's all alone out there. Charity, Mrs. Brennan repeated, her lips pursing. Yes, that must be it. But Raymond didn't care what they thought. He'd stopped caring about the opinions of small-minded people years ago. What he did care about was the way Martha started pulling away. It was subtle at first. She'd make excuses about being too busy when he offered to come by. She'd cut their evening short, claiming she was tired even when he could see she wasn't. She stopped meeting his eyes as much, stopped laughing as freely. What's wrong? He asked one night when she practically shoved him out the door before he'd even finished his coffee. Nothing's wrong. Don't lie to me, Martha. She wrapped her arms around herself, shoulders hunched like she was trying to disappear. You need to stop coming here, Raymond. His stomach dropped. Why? Because people are talking. So? So it's not fair to you. Let me decide what's fair to me. You don't understand. Her voice cracked and she turned away from him, staring out at the dark fields beyond her porch. They're saying terrible things about me, about you, about what they think we're doing. I don't give a damn. Well, I do. She whirled on him, and he saw tears streaking down her face. I do, Raymond, because when you finally wise up and realize you're wasting your time on someone like me, you're gonna leave, and I'm the one who'll still be here. I'm the one who'll have to live with everyone knowing I was stupid enough to think. She couldn't finish. Her breath hitched, and she pressed her hands to her face. Raymond's heart was breaking clean in half. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides and pulled her hands away from her face, holding them tight in his own. Look at me. She shook her head, but he ducked down until she had no choice. I'm not wasting my time, he said, low and fierce, and I'm not going anywhere. You hear me? I'm not some kid with a passing fancy. I know exactly what I'm doing. You can't possibly. I'm in love with you, Martha. The words fell out of him like stones, heavy and irrevocable. She went completely still. You don't mean that, she whispered. I do. You can't. I do. Raymond, you barely know me. I know enough. I know you're the kindest person I've ever met. I know you work harder than any 3 men I employ. I know you've got a laugh that makes me feel like I've been punched in the chest. I know when I'm not with you, nothing else feels right. He tightened his grip on her hands. So yeah, Martha, I mean it. And I'm not going to stop meaning it just because you're scared. She stared at him, eyes wide and wet, her whole body trembling. I'm not what you want, she said finally, her voice breaking. I'm not small or pretty or... Stop. It's true. You think I care about any of that? He let go of her hands and cupped her face instead, thumbs brushing away her tears. You think I've been coming here for months because I'm confused about what I want? Martha, you're everything I want, exactly as you are. People will never accept it. Then they can go to hell. A sob broke out of her, half laugh, half cry, and she leaned into him like all the fight had gone out of her at once. Raymond wrapped his arms around her and held on tight, his face buried in her hair, breathing her in like she was air and he'd been drowning. I'm scared, she whispered against his chest. I know. What if you change your mind? I won't. You don't know that. Yes, I do. She pulled back just enough to look up at him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. He didn't give her one. I've never felt this way about anyone, Martha. Never even come close. And I don't want to. You're it for me. Her breath shuddered out of her. This is crazy. Probably. People are going to make our lives hell. Let them try. And then before she could talk herself out of it, before fear could steal the moment away, Martha stood on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't graceful. Their noses bumped and she pulled back immediately, flustered and blushing, stammering an apology. But Raymond just smiled, slid his hand to the back of her neck and kissed her properly. She tasted like tears and hope and the peppermint tea she'd been drinking earlier. Her lips were soft, hesitant at first. then more certain as he deepened the kiss. His other hand found her waist, pulling her closer, and she made a small sound in the back of her throat that nearly undid him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Martha looked up at him with wonder written all over her face. "Well," she said shakily, "I guess that just happened." Raymond laughed, resting his forehead against hers. "Yeah, it did. What now?" "Now," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple, "I'm going to keep coming here every damn day until you get sick of me. That might take a while." Good. He kept his word. Every evening after the ranch work was done, Raymond rode out to Martha's farm. Sometimes he brought supplies he claimed he didn't need: flour, sugar, coffee beans. Sometimes he just showed up empty-handed and grinning, ready to chop wood or fix whatever had broken that week. They fell into a rhythm that felt natural as breathing. She'd cook while he worked, and he'd tease her about adding too much butter to everything. And she'd threaten him with a wooden spoon, and they'd both end up laughing. They'd eat together at that scarred kitchen table, knees bumping underneath, and talk about everything and nothing. She told him about her mother, who died when Martha was 12. About her father, who'd loved her fiercely, but never quite knew how to say it. About the years she'd spent trying to make herself smaller, quieter, less of a burden. He told her about the ranch he'd built from nothing, about the loneliness that had settled into his bones somewhere along the way, about how he'd started to think maybe he just wasn't built for love, that maybe he'd missed his chance. "And then I saw you singing to yourself while making bread," he said one night. "And I thought, well, hell, maybe I was just waiting." She blushed and smacked his arm. "You're ridiculous." "You like it?" "Unfortunately." But she was smiling, actually smiling. The real kind, the one that lit up her whole face. Raymond wanted to give her 1,000 more reasons to smile like that. Not everything was easy. There were nights when Martha's fear came roaring back, when she'd spiral into panic about what people were saying, about how this couldn't possibly last. "They saw us together at the feed store," she said one evening, pacing her kitchen like a caged animal. "Mrs. Brennan looked at me like I'd committed murder." "Mrs. Brennan looks at everyone like that." "It's different with me. You know it is." Raymond caught her hand as she passed, pulling her to a stop. "Let them look." "Easy for you to say." "No," he said firmly. "It's not easy for me. You think I like hearing people talk about you like you're not worth loving? You think it doesn't make me want to knock heads together? But I'm not going to hide what I feel because small-minded people can't understand it. I just don't want you to regret this." "I won't." "You can't know that." He pulled her into his lap, ignoring her surprised squeak, and held her close. "Martha Keller," he said against her hair, "you're going to have to trust that I know my own mind. I'm not some confused kid. I'm a grown man who's choosing you every single day, and I'm going to keep choosing you, no matter how many times you ask me if I'm sure." She was quiet for a long moment, her head resting against his shoulder. "Okay," she whispered finally. "Okay? I'll try to believe you. That's all I'm asking." Winter came hard and fast that year. The first real freeze caught everyone off guard, and Martha's chickens huddled together in their coop, refusing to come out even for food. Raymond showed up early one morning to find her outside in the bitter cold, trying to coax them out with bits of dried corn. "Get inside," he said, pulling off his coat and draping it around her shoulders. "You're going to catch your death. The chickens will be fine. Come on." He practically dragged her inside, built up the fire until the kitchen was warm again, and made her sit while he heated water for tea. "You can't keep doing this," he said, not looking at her as he worked. "Working yourself into the ground." "I don't have a choice." "You do." He turned to face her. "Marry me." Martha's mouth fell open. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "Move to the ranch. Let me take care of you for once." "Raymond, you can't just—" "Why not?" Because people will—" "I don't care about people. I care about you. And I care that you're out here alone, freezing half to death, barely scraping by when you don't have to. I'm not a charity case." "That's not what I'm saying. It's what it sounds like." He crossed to her, crouching down so they were eye level. "I'm asking you to marry me because I love you, because I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night, because the thought of you out here struggling alone makes me lose my mind. Not because I pity you, never that." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "This is insane." So you keep saying, we've only been, whatever this is, for a few months. I don't need more time to know, but I do. Her voice broke. Raymond, I need to believe this is real, that you're not going to wake up one day and realize you made a terrible mistake. His chest ached. How do I prove it to you? I don't know, she whispered. I don't know. So he decided to show her instead. The next week there was a social at the town hall. A spring dance, even though spring was still weeks away and the ground was frozen solid. Raymond had never cared much for dances. Too much noise, too many people, too much pointless small talk. But he knew Martha hadn't been to one in years. Knew she avoided them like plague because she couldn't stand the stares, the whispers, the way people looked through her like she wasn't there. He showed up at her farm wearing his best black coat, his hat brushed clean, his boots polished. Martha opened the door and immediately tried to close it again. No, come to the dance with me. Absolutely not. Martha, no, Raymond, I'm not doing that. I'm not walking into that hall so everyone can laugh at me. They won't. They will. Her eyes were fierce. They always do. And I don't care what you say, I'm not putting myself through that. He caught the door before she could slam it. What if I promise to make it worth your while? There's nothing you could possibly... Trust me, he said quietly. Just this once. Trust me. She stared at him for a long moment, conflict warring across her face. Then, against every instinct screaming at her to stay hidden, she sighed. Fine. But when this goes badly, I'm never speaking to you again. He grinned. Deal. The town hall was packed by the time they arrived. Every lantern was lit, casting warm light across the worn wooden floors. Someone had strung up pine branches and dried flowers in a half-hearted attempt at decoration. The fiddler was already playing, and couples were scattered across the dance floor, spinning and laughing. The moment Raymond and Martha stepped through the door together, the music didn't stop, but it might as well have. Every head turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Martha felt the weight of their stares like physical blows, and she immediately tried to turn back around. But Raymond's hand was firm at the small of her back, guiding her forward. Easy, he murmured. Just breathe. This was a mistake. Trust me. He led her straight through the crowd, not stopping, not acknowledging anyone, until they reached the center of the dance floor. Then he turned to face her, took her hand, and pulled her close. Raymond, she hissed, panic bright in her eyes. Everyone is staring. I know. We should leave. Not yet. And then he started to dance. It wasn't complicated, just a simple waltz, slow and steady, his hand warm against her back. But Martha was shaking so hard she could barely follow his lead. They're all watching, she whispered, her voice breaking. Good. Raymond, let them look, he said, quiet and firm. Let them see exactly who I'm choosing. Let them know I don't give a damn what they think. Tears filled her eyes. Why are you doing this? He pulled her closer until there was barely any space between them and leaned down to speak directly into her ear. Because you deserve to be loved out loud, Martha. Not hidden away like something shameful. You deserve to walk into a room on my arm and know that I'm proud to be with you. A sob caught in her throat. Around them, the whispers started. Cruel, cutting, exactly what Martha had feared. Can you believe it? Raymond Hale and her? He must have lost his mind. Poor man. Someone should talk sense into him. Martha heard every word, felt them like knives. But then Raymond's hand tightened on hers, and he said loud enough for half the room to hear, You're the most beautiful woman here. She looked up at him, shocked. He wasn't looking at anyone else, wasn't paying attention to the stares or the whispers or the judgment radiating from every corner of the room. He was looking at her like she was the only person who existed. And something inside Martha, something that had been locked down and hidden for so long she'd forgotten it was there, finally broke free. She stopped trying to make herself small, stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped caring what any of these people thought. Because Raymond Hale, the best man she'd ever known, loved her, actually, truly loved her. And that was worth more than all their approval combined. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest, and let him lead her through the dance. Behind them, the whispers continued. The judgment didn't stop. But for the first time in her life, Martha didn't care. They stayed until the music ended. When Raymond finally led her outside, the night air was cold and sharp, but Martha felt warm all the way through. They walked in silence back to her farm, his arm around her shoulders, her head tilted against his side. When they reached her gate, she turned to face him. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For seeing me. Really seeing me." His throat worked. "Always." She reached up, cupped his face in her hands, and kissed him. It was different this time, slower, deeper, full of all the things she didn't know how to say out loud. When they broke apart, Raymond rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said again. And this time Martha didn't hesitate. "Yes." His eyes widened. "Yes?" "Yes, you stubborn fool. I'll marry you." He let out a breath that sounded like relief and joy and disbelief all tangled together, and then he was kissing her again, lifting her clean off her feet, spinning her around under the Texas stars. When he finally set her down, they were both laughing, breathless and giddy, and completely undone. "I love you," Martha said, the words spilling out of her for the first time. "I love you so much it scares me." "Good," Raymond said, grinning like a fool. "Be scared with me." And standing there in the cold, under the endless sky, with the woman he loved finally in his arms, Raymond Hale had never felt more certain of anything in his life. This was it. This was everything. The town didn't take the news well. When Raymond and Martha announced their engagement the following week, the reaction ranged from shocked silence to outright hostility. Mrs. Brennan actually clutched her chest like she was having heart palpitations right there in the general store. Mr. Yates shook his head and muttered something about a damn shame under his breath. The younger women, the ones who'd been batting their eyelashes at Raymond for years, looked at Martha like she'd committed theft. Martha had expected it, had braced herself for it even. But expecting cruelty and experiencing it were two different things entirely. She was measuring out flour at the counter when Clara Peterson sidled up next to her, all false sweetness and venom. "Well," Clara said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "I suppose every man goes through a phase where he makes questionable decisions. Raymond will come to his senses eventually." Martha's hand stilled on the scoop. "Excuse me? Oh, don't play dumb, dear. We all know this won't last. Men like Raymond Hale don't marry women like you." Clara's smile was sharp as broken glass. "He's just being kind, charitable even. But charity only goes so far." Something hot and sharp twisted in Martha's chest. For a moment, just a moment, she felt herself shrinking again, felt all the old shame rushing back. But then she remembered the way Raymond had held her on that dance floor, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. Martha set down the flour scoop, turned to face Clara fully, and smiled. "You know what, Clara? I used to think like you. Used to think I wasn't worth loving, that someone like Raymond couldn't possibly want someone like me." She picked up her purchases, tucked them under her arm. "But then I realized something. The problem wasn't me. The problem was people like you, so miserable in your own lives that you can't stand to see anyone else find happiness." Clara's face went red. "How dare you?" "I dare because I'm done caring what small people think." Martha moved past her toward the door. "Enjoy your bitterness, Clara. I'll be too busy being happy to notice it." She walked out of the store with her head high, her heart pounding, and her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped everything the moment she turned the corner. But she'd done it. She'd stood up for herself, for Raymond, for what they had. And it felt terrifying and exhilarating all at once. When she told Raymond about it later that evening, he laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. "You said that? To Clara Peterson? Don't sound so surprised." "I'm not surprised. I'm impressed." He pulled her into his lap, ignoring her half-hearted protests. "That's my girl." "I'm not a girl. I'm 32 years old." "My woman, then." She felt her face heat. "That sounds... what?" "Possessive. Good." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Because I am. You're mine, Martha Keller, and I don't care who knows it." She turned in his arms, straddling his lap properly now, and kissed him hard enough to steal his breath. "Careful," Raymond murmured against her mouth. "Keep doing that, and we won't make it to the wedding." "Who says we have to wait?" he groaned. You're killing me. Is that a no? That's a, we're doing this properly. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her bottom lip. I want to marry you first. Want to do right by you. Martha's throat tightened. You already do right by me. Not enough. Not yet. They set the wedding for 6 weeks out. It wasn't much time, but neither of them wanted to wait longer than necessary. Martha would have been happy with a quick ceremony at the county clerk's office, but Raymond insisted on doing it properly. Witnesses, a preacher, a real celebration. People are going to talk no matter what we do, he said when she protested. Might as well give them something worth talking about. So they planned. And in the spaces between planning, they built a life together in small, ordinary moments that felt anything but ordinary to Martha. Raymond started spending most nights at her farm, sleeping on the narrow cot in the corner of the kitchen because propriety still mattered, even if barely. He'd wake before dawn to handle the ranch work, then ride back in the evenings with supplies or food, or sometimes just himself, grinning and dusty and so happy to see her it made her chest ache. She'd cook for him, massive meals that used up half her supplies, because feeding him felt like loving him, like proving she could take care of him the way he took care of her. He'd eat everything she put in front of him and ask for seconds, and she'd swat at his hands when he tried to steal bites while she was still cooking. Patience, she'd say, brandishing a wooden spoon like a weapon. Can't help it. Everything you make is too damn good. Flattery won't get you an early taste. Won't it? He'd catch her around the waist, pull her back against his chest, press his lips to the spot just below her ear that made her shiver. You sure about that? She'd melt every single time. They'd sit on the porch after dinner, wrapped in blankets because the nights were still cold, and talk about everything and nothing. He told her about the ranch, about his plans to expand the herd, about the new irrigation system he wanted to build. She told him about the garden she wanted to plant in spring, about the chickens that had finally started laying again. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. Just sat in comfortable silence, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him, listening to the wind move through the cedar trees. One night, Martha worked up the courage to ask the question that had been eating at her for weeks. Do you ever regret it? Raymond looked down at her. Regret what? This, me. Choosing someone the whole town thinks is wrong for you. He was quiet for a moment, and her stomach dropped. But then he shifted, turning so he could look at her properly. You want to know what I regret? She nodded, afraid of the answer. I regret not doing this sooner. I regret all the time I wasted being too afraid to tell you how I felt. I regret every day you spent thinking you weren't worth loving. His hand found hers, lacing their fingers together. But choosing you, loving you, that's the best decision I've ever made. And I don't care if the whole state of Texas disagrees. Tears burned behind her eyes. You say that now? I'll say it in 50 years too. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. You're stuck with me, Martha. Better get used to it. She believed him. Not completely. Years of being told she wasn't enough had left scars that wouldn't heal overnight. But she was starting to trust that maybe, just maybe, this was real. The following week, Raymond took her to see the ranch. She'd never been there before. Had avoided it, actually, because the thought of seeing where he lived, where she'd be living soon, felt too real, too permanent. What if she walked in and realized she didn't belong there either? What if the house rejected her the way the town had? But Raymond had been patient long enough. Come on, he'd said that morning, already saddling up his horse. I want to show you your home. Your home. The words made something warm unfurl in her chest. The ranch was bigger than she'd imagined. Rolling fields stretched out in every direction, dotted with cattle and bordered by split-rail fences Raymond had built himself. The house sat on a small rise, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and real glass windows. It wasn't fancy. The paint was peeling in places, and one of the shutters hung crooked. But it was solid, well-built, cared for. It needs work, Raymond said as they approached, suddenly nervous in a way she'd never seen him. The roof leaks in the back bedroom and the kitchen's smaller than yours, but I can expand it if you want. And the bedroom upstairs, that's ours. It's got good light in the mornings. I thought you might like that. For sewing or reading or whatever you want to do. He was rambling. Raymond Hale, the most confident man she'd ever met, was actually nervous about whether she'd like his house. It made her love him even more. Raymond. He stopped talking, looked at her. It's perfect. His shoulders relaxed. Yeah? Yeah. He took her hand and led her inside. The house smelled like wood smoke and leather and something distinctly masculine. The furniture was sparse but well made. A heavy oak table, a few chairs, a worn sofa near the fireplace. Everything was clean but clearly unloved. The home of a man who'd been living alone for too long. I know it's not much, Raymond started, but Martha cut him off. It's more than I've ever had. She walked through the room slowly, running her hands over surfaces, imagining where she'd put things. The kitchen was small, like he'd said, but workable. There was a root cellar below and a good-sized pantry. She could make it hers. Upstairs, the bedroom took her breath away. It was big, bigger than her entire house back at the farm. A massive bed dominated one wall, covered in a simple quilt that had definitely seen better days. But the windows were huge, facing east, and even now in the late afternoon she could imagine how the morning sun would pour through them. You like it? Raymond asked from the doorway. Martha turned to him, tears threatening again. I love it. He crossed to her in 3 strides, pulled her into his arms. It's yours. All of it. I want you to change whatever you want, move things around, make it feel like home. It already does, she whispered against his chest. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in the bedroom that would soon be theirs, and Martha let herself imagine it. Waking up here every morning, cooking breakfast in that kitchen, sitting on the porch with Raymond in the evenings, building a life together in this place that already felt more like home than anywhere she'd ever been. Thank you, she said finally. For what? For wanting me here. For making space for me in your life. He pulled back just enough to look at her. Martha, you don't take up space in my life. You are my life now. Everything else is just details. She kissed him then, hard and desperate, and full of all the things she still didn't know how to say. He responded immediately, his hands sliding into her hair, angling her head so he could deepen the kiss. They broke apart, breathing hard, and Raymond rested his forehead against hers. We should go, he said, his voice rough. Before I do something we agreed to wait on. Maybe waiting is overrated. He laughed, low and strained. Don't tempt me. But they did wait, barely, and the waiting made everything feel sharper, more intense. Every kiss was edged with wanting. Every touch lingered longer than necessary. The tension built between them like a living thing, until Martha thought she might actually lose her mind. 3 weeks before the wedding, disaster struck. Martha woke one morning to find half her chickens dead in the coop, killed by something. A fox maybe, or a raccoon. The surviving birds were traumatized, and several of her laying hens stopped producing eggs entirely. It shouldn't have been devastating. They were just chickens. But those chickens had been her primary source of income beyond sewing. The eggs paid for supplies, for fabric, for the small luxuries that made life bearable. Without them, she had nothing. She sat in the dirt outside the coop, surrounded by feathered bodies, and cried harder than she had in years. That's how Raymond found her. He didn't say anything at first, just knelt down beside her in the dirt, put his arm around her shoulders, and let her sob against his chest. I'm sorry, she hiccuped eventually. I know it's stupid. They're just chickens. They're not just chickens. They're your livelihood. Were my livelihood. She pulled back, wiping at her face with dirty hands. Now I've got nothing to contribute. Nothing to bring to the marriage except debt and a failing farm and, hey! He caught her face in his hands, made her look at him. Stop. You're bringing yourself, and that's all I want. All I've ever wanted. But no buts. We'll get more chickens, better chickens. I'll build you a coop that nothing can break into. We'll figure it out together. You shouldn't have to. I want to. His thumbs brushed away her tears. That's what marriage is, isn't it? Figuring things out together, being a team. She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle it herself, but the truth was, she was exhausted, tired of fighting alone, tired of pretending she didn't need help. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Let's be a team. Raymond smiled, soft and relieved, and kissed her forehead. Best decision you've ever made. They buried the chickens together that afternoon. It was grim work, but having Raymond beside her made it bearable. When they finished, he wouldn't let her go back to the house alone. Come to the ranch, he said. Stay the night. You shouldn't be by yourself right now. People will talk. Let them. So she went. That night, they lay together in Raymond's bed, fully clothed, propriety still technically intact, and talked until the early hours of the morning. She told him about the time her father had died and she'd found him in the barn, already gone. How she'd sat with him for hours before finally going for help because she couldn't stand the thought of being alone. He told her about the year the drought had nearly destroyed him, how he'd almost lost everything he'd built, how close he'd come to giving up entirely. "What stopped you?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. Stubbornness, mostly, and the thought that maybe things would get better if I just held on a little longer. Did they? Eventually. He pulled her closer, her back against his chest, his arm heavy and warm across her waist. And then you came along, and suddenly everything I'd been holding on for made sense. Martha laced her fingers through his. Never thought I'd have this. Have what? Someone who stays. His arm tightened around her. I'm not going anywhere, Martha. Not ever. She believed him. Finally, fully believed him. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Martha Keller fell asleep feeling safe. The morning came too soon. Raymond had to leave before dawn to handle ranch business, but he woke her gently, kissed her forehead, and promised to come back that evening. Go home and rest, he said. I'll bring dinner. You don't have to. I want to. She watched him ride away in the gray pre-dawn light and felt the absence of him like a physical ache. But there was work to do, always work to do. Martha spent the day cleaning out the destroyed chicken coop, scrubbing away blood and feathers until her hands were raw. She'd started on the fence repairs when she heard a wagon approaching. It was Mrs. Chen, the Chinese woman who ran the laundry at the edge of town. She and Martha had a cordial relationship built on mutual respect and shared outsider status. The town didn't trust Mrs. Chen because of her race. They didn't trust Martha because of her size. It made them unlikely allies. I heard about chickens, Mrs. Chen said without preamble, climbing down from her wagon. Bring you these. She gestured to the back of the wagon where 6 healthy hens sat in wooden crates, clucking softly. Martha's throat closed up. I can't. I don't have money to. Not selling, giving. Mrs. Chen's face was stern. You fixed my daughter's wedding dress for nothing last year. This is thank you. That was different. I wanted to, and I want to give chickens. We are even now. Martha's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Mrs. Chen nodded once, brisk and matter-of-fact, then helped Martha unload the crates. The older woman stayed for tea afterward, and they sat in Martha's kitchen making small talk that felt more like friendship than anything Martha had experienced in town before. Raymond Hale is good man, Mrs. Chen said as she was leaving. Town is stupid about you and him, but you are happy. That is what matters. Thank you, Martha said again, meaning it more than she could express. After Mrs. Chen left, Martha stood in her yard, surrounded by the soft clucking of her new chickens, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the desperate, fragile kind she'd been clinging to, but real, solid hope. The kind built on genuine kindness and the knowledge that she wasn't actually as alone as she'd always thought. When Raymond showed up that evening with dinner, fried chicken from the restaurant in town and fresh bread he'd clearly bought just for her, Martha threw her arms around his neck and kissed him until they were both dizzy. Not that I'm complaining, he said when they finally broke apart, but what was that for? Mrs. Chen brought me chickens. He blinked. And that made you want to kiss me? No, you made me want to kiss you. The chickens just reminded me how lucky I am. I'm the lucky one. We can both be lucky. He grinned. Deal. They ate dinner on the porch, legs tangled together on the steps, and Martha felt something settle in her chest. A certainty. A bone-deep knowledge that this, all of this, was real. 2 weeks before the wedding, Martha's dress still wasn't finished. She'd been working on it in stolen moments between everything else. But there was always something more urgent. A fence that needed mending, a customer's order that had to be filled, the never-ending work of survival. Raymond found her one evening hunched over the fabric, squinting in the lamplight, her fingers bleeding from where she'd stuck herself with the needle for the 4th time. That's it, he said, taking the needle from her hand. You're done for tonight. I have to finish. It'll wait. He pulled her to her feet. Come here. He led her to the kitchen, sat her down, and carefully bandaged her fingers. Then he made her tea, forced her to drink it, and carried her bodily to bed when she tried to go back to sewing. Raymond, I'm too heavy. You're not even close to too heavy. Stop arguing. He tucked her in like a child, kissed her forehead, and then shocked her completely by sitting down with her wedding dress and a needle. What are you doing? She asked. Helping. You can't sew. How hard can it be? You stick the needle through the fabric and pull it tight, right? That's extremely oversimplified. So teach me. She stared at him. You're serious. Dead serious. You're exhausted and this dress needs to get finished. I've got 2 working hands and passable eyesight. Use me. So she did. It was possibly the most endearing disaster she'd ever witnessed. Raymond's stitches were huge and uneven. His thread kept tangling, and he stuck himself so many times he finally gave up and put on her sewing gloves, which looked ridiculous on his large, work-roughened hands. But he kept at it, determined and stubborn and so focused on helping her that Martha fell in love with him all over again. You're terrible at this, she said, laughing as she unpicked his latest attempt. I know. The stitches are supposed to be invisible. These are visible. Very visible. He looked up at her, grinning despite the bead of blood on his thumb from the latest needle stick. But I'm trying. You are. She leaned over and kissed him. And I love you for it. Love you too. Even if I'm ruining your dress. You're not ruining it. You're making it memorable. They worked together until midnight, Martha doing the actual sewing while Raymond held fabric, threaded needles, and kept her company. It wasn't efficient, but it was perfect anyway. The week before the wedding, the town made one last attempt to stop them. A delegation showed up at Martha's farm, 3 of the most prominent men in Merritt's Crossing, all of them looking deeply uncomfortable. Miss Keller, Mr. Yates began, hat in his hands, we need to speak with you about Raymond Hale. Martha's stomach sank, but she kept her face neutral. What about him? We're concerned that you don't fully understand what you're doing. Raymond is, well, he's an important member of this community, a successful rancher, a man of means, and you're a fat seamstress living on a failing farm, Martha supplied when he trailed off. Mr. Yates had the decency to look embarrassed. We're just trying to protect him. From what? From being happy? From making a mistake he'll regret. White, hot anger flooded through her. Get off my property. Miss Keller, I said get off my property. Now, before I get my father's shotgun and help you along. They left, muttering among themselves, and Martha slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. She was still shaking with rage when Raymond showed up an hour later. One look at her face and he knew something had happened. What's wrong? She told him, watched his jaw tighten with every word. I'll handle it, he said when she finished. Raymond, no, this ends now. He rode into town that afternoon and found Mr. Yates, Mr. Brennan, and Mr. Patterson at the saloon. The entire establishment went quiet when he walked in. I hear you gentlemen paid a visit to my fiancée, Raymond said, his voice dangerously calm. Mr. Yates shifted uncomfortably. Now, Raymond, we were just trying to You were trying to bully a woman into calling off a wedding because you've decided she's not good enough for me. Raymond stepped closer. Let me make something very clear. Martha Keller is the best thing that's ever happened to me. She's kinder, stronger, and more genuine than anyone in this entire town. And if you ever go near her again with your small-minded nonsense, we're going to have a problem. Are we understood? The 3 men nodded, not meeting his eyes. Good. Raymond turned to address the entire saloon. While I've got everyone's attention, let me say this once. I'm marrying Martha Keller in 6 days. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. But you leave her alone. She's done nothing to deserve the way this town treats her except exist. And I'm done pretending that's acceptable. He walked out to stunned silence. When he got back to Martha's farm and told her what he'd done, she burst into tears. Happy tears? He asked nervously. Very happy tears, you idiot. She threw her arms around him. I can't believe you did that. Someone needed to. They're going to hate you now. Don't care, I've got you. That's all that matters. The night before the wedding, Martha couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, her last night in this house before moving to the ranch, and let herself feel the enormity of what was about to happen. Tomorrow, she'd become Raymond Hale's wife. Tomorrow, her entire life would change. The fear tried to creep back in, all the old doubts and insecurities whispering that this couldn't possibly work, that he'd wake up one day and realize what a mistake he'd made. But then she thought about the way he looked at her, the way he defended her, the way he'd sat up until midnight trying to sew her wedding dress even though he was terrible at it, the way he loved her, fully and without reservation, exactly as she was. And Martha Keller, the woman who'd spent her entire life believing she didn't deserve love, finally let herself believe she did. The morning of the wedding, Martha woke to rain. Not a gentle spring shower, but a full-throated Texas downpour that turned the roads to mud and sent water streaming down the windows in sheets. She lay in bed listening to it hammer against the roof and felt her stomach twist into knots. Of course it was raining. Of course the weather had decided to make everything harder. She dragged herself out of bed and immediately tripped over her wedding dress, which she'd left draped across the chair. The fabric had slipped to the floor during the night, and now one corner was dusty from the floorboards. Perfect, she muttered, picking it up and brushing it off. Just perfect. Her hands were shaking, had been shaking since she woke up, and they wouldn't stop no matter how many times she pressed them flat against her thighs and told herself to calm down. This was what she wanted. Raymond was what she wanted. So why did she feel like she might throw up? A knock at the door startled her so badly she nearly dropped the dress again. Who is it? Mrs. Chen, and I bring help. Martha opened the door to find not just Mrs. Chen, but 3 other women standing on her porch, all of them holding baskets covered with cloth to protect them from the rain. We come to help you get ready, Mrs. Chen announced, pushing past Martha into the house. You cannot do this alone. The other women followed. Maria Gonzalez, who ran the boarding house at the edge of town. Sarah Running Deer, whose husband worked one of the neighboring ranches. And surprisingly, Ann Porter, a younger woman Martha had made a dress for last year. I don't understand, Martha said, staring at them all. Why are you? Because every woman deserves help on her wedding day, Ann said firmly. And because what Raymond said at the saloon needed saying. We've all been too quiet for too long. Martha's throat tightened. You don't have to. We want to, Maria interrupted, already unpacking her basket. Now sit down and let us work. They descended on her like a small, determined army. Mrs. Chen took charge of the dress, examining every seam and stitch with a critical eye before nodding her approval. Maria started doing something complicated with Martha's hair, working it into braids and pins that actually looked intentional instead of like Martha had just given up halfway through. Sarah heated water on the stove for washing, and Anne laid out the simple shoes Martha had planned to wear. These will not do, Anne said, frowning at the worn leather. Your feet will be soaked before you reach the church. They're all I have. Anne disappeared outside and returned 5 minutes later with a pair of nicer boots. My sister's. She's about your size. You can return them after. Martha didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to process this sudden influx of kindness from women who'd spent years ignoring her at best, mocking her at worst. Why are you doing this? She asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The women exchanged glances. Because we were wrong, Sarah said quietly. About you. About a lot of things. And maybe it's too late to undo all the hurt, but we can at least do this. Some of us anyway, Maria added with a bitter laugh. Clara Peterson and her crowd are probably sharpening their knives as we speak. Let them, Mrs. Chen said sharply. They are small people with small hearts. We are better. Martha's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. Not yet. Not when she still had to get through the ceremony without her face turning into a blotchy mess. Thank you, she managed. All of you, thank you. Mrs. Chen patted her shoulder briskly. No crying yet will ruin Maria's work on your face. I haven't done her face yet, Maria protested. Then hurry. We have 2 hours. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. Maria did something with powder and rouge that made Martha's cheeks look less flushed and more alive. Anne hemmed the dress one final time, adjusting for the borrowed boots. Sarah made tea and forced Martha to drink it, claiming it would settle her stomach. Through it all, the rain continued, relentless and loud. What if no one comes? Martha asked at one point, staring out the window at the flooding yard. What if they all decide it's not worth getting soaked for? Then you marry Raymond anyway, Anne said practically. You only need the preacher and 2 witnesses. Everything else is just show. But Martha wanted more than just the bare minimum. Not for herself. She would have been happy to marry Raymond in a muddy field with no witnesses at all. But for him. She wanted him to have a real wedding, the kind he deserved. Wanted to prove to everyone watching that she could be the wife he needed, even if the thought of everyone watching made her want to hide in the root cellar. By the time they finished, Martha barely recognized herself in the small, cracked mirror she owned. The dress fit perfectly, hugging her curves in a way that felt intentional rather than apologetic. Her hair was swept up and pinned with small white flowers Anne had brought. Her face looked softer somehow, less worn down by years of hard work and harder words. She looked like a bride. Raymond will fall over when he sees you, Sarah said with satisfaction. He'd better not. Who'll marry us if he's unconscious? Martha tried to joke, but her voice cracked. Mrs. Chen gripped her shoulders firmly. You are beautiful. You are loved. You deserve this happiness. Remember these things when stupid people say stupid things today. Martha nodded, not trusting herself to speak. The church was only half a mile from her farm, but in the rain it felt like 10. The women had brought a wagon, and they all crowded under the canvas cover to keep the dress dry. Martha sat in the middle, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers Sarah had somehow procured despite the weather, and tried to remember how to breathe. What if I trip walking down the aisle? She asked suddenly. You won't, Maria said. But what if I do? Then Raymond will help you up and you'll keep going, Anne said. Martha, you need to stop looking for disasters. I'm not looking for them. They tend to find me anyway. Not today, Mrs. Chen said firmly. Today is good day. The church came into view through the rain, and Martha's heart kicked into her throat. There were people outside. Not many, but more than she'd expected. Huddled under the overhang, waiting. She recognized some of Raymond's ranch hands, a few of the families from the outlying farms, and, surprisingly, old Mr. Patterson, who'd been part of the delegation that tried to stop the wedding. Maybe he'd come to object. The wagon pulled to a stop, and Maria helped Martha down, holding the dress up so it wouldn't drag in the mud. I can't do this, Martha said suddenly. I can't walk in there with everyone staring. Yes, you can, Sarah said, because Raymond is in there waiting for you, and that man looks at you like you hung the moon. Don't you dare leave him standing at that altar. Martha took a shaky breath, then another. Then she straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and walked toward the church. The moment she stepped inside, everyone turned to look. The church was maybe a third full, not nearly as crowded as she'd feared, but not empty either. Raymond's ranch hands took up 2 pews. Mrs. Chen's family sat near the front. A scattering of other folks filled in the gaps, some looking genuinely happy to be there, others wearing expressions that ranged from curious to openly hostile. But Martha barely saw any of them, because Raymond was standing at the altar, and the look on his face when he saw her made everything else disappear. He'd cleaned up, shaved, trimmed his hair, put on a suit that was probably 10 years old, but still fit him well enough. But it was his expression that undid her, complete and total awe, like she was the most incredible thing he'd ever seen. His eyes got bright. His throat worked. And when she was close enough to hear, he whispered, You're so beautiful. She wanted to argue, wanted to deflect, but the way he was looking at her made the words die in her throat. Hi, she said instead, because apparently her brain had stopped working. He smiled, a little wobbly. Hi. The preacher cleared his throat. He was an older man, Reverend Davies, who'd always been kind to Martha in a distant, pastoral sort of way. He looked between them now with something that might have been approval. Shall we begin? The ceremony itself passed in a strange, dreamlike haze. Martha heard the words, heard herself responding in the right places, heard Raymond's voice steady and sure beside her, but it all felt removed somehow, like she was watching it happen to someone else. Until Raymond took her hands. His palms were rough and warm, calloused from ranch work, but so gentle it made her chest ache. He laced his fingers through hers and held on like he was afraid she might disappear. I, Raymond Hale, take you, Martha Keller, to be my wife, he said, his voice carrying through the small church. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer. in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death parts us. He said it like a vow, like a promise he'd die before breaking. Martha's turn came, and her voice shook so badly she had to start twice. I, Martha Keller, take you, Raymond Hale, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death parts us. The words felt too big, too permanent, too impossibly wonderful. Reverend Davies pronounced them married, and Raymond didn't wait for permission. He pulled Martha against him and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. Someone in the back of the church whistled. Martha heard one of the ranch hands holler something congratulatory, but mostly she just heard her own heartbeat thundering in her ears and felt Raymond's arms solid and real around her. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "You're stuck with me now," he murmured. "Good." They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, and if some of the faces watching them were less than friendly, Martha found she didn't care nearly as much as she thought she would. She was Raymond Hale's wife now. Let them try to take that from her. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Someone, probably one of the ranch hands, had decorated Raymond's wagon with ribbons and flowers that were now thoroughly soaked and bedraggled. "It's perfect," Martha said, and meant it. Raymond helped her up into the seat, then climbed up beside her. Before he could take the reins, though, Mr. Patterson approached. Martha tensed, but the old man just stood there in the rain, hat in his hands. "I owe you both an apology," he said gruffly. "What I did, trying to stop this. It was wrong. You've got more spine than most people in this town, Miss Keller. Mrs. Hale, I mean. Raymond's lucky to have you." Martha didn't know what to say. Didn't know if she could forgive that easily. But Raymond squeezed her hand and she found herself nodding. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson." The old man nodded back and stepped away. They drove to the ranch through mud and drizzle, both of them soaked before they'd gone half a mile. But Martha couldn't stop smiling. Couldn't stop looking at the ring on her finger, a simple silver band Raymond had bought in town, nothing fancy but solid and real. She was married. Actually, legally, impossibly married. To the best man she'd ever known. When they reached the ranch house, Raymond pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to her. "I'm going to carry you over the threshold," he announced. "You absolutely are not. It's tradition. Raymond, I'm too—" He scooped her up before she could finish the sentence, dress and all, and carried her up the porch steps like she weighed nothing at all. "You were saying," he asked, grinning, "that you're impossible, and you love me anyway." "Unfortunately." He set her down in the kitchen, and for a moment they just stood there, dripping on the floor, looking at each other. "We're married," Martha said, like she still couldn't quite believe it. "We are. What do we do now?" Raymond's grin turned wicked. "I've got a few ideas." She blushed so hard she felt it all the way to her toes. "We should probably eat something first. It's been hours. Later." He kissed her, slow and deliberate, and Martha forgot all about food. He pulled back just far enough to murmur against her lips. "Can I take you upstairs now, Mrs. Hale?" The name sent a thrill through her. Yes. The bedroom was exactly as she remembered from her first visit, big and bright even on a rainy day with that massive bed dominating one wall. But now it felt different, like it was actually hers, actually theirs. Raymond started working on the buttons of her dress, his fingers clumsy with urgency. "I don't want to tear it," he muttered. "But there are so many damn buttons. Here." Martha turned around, giving him better access. "Start from the top." He managed 3 buttons before giving up and just pressing his mouth to the back of her neck instead. "You're not helping," she said, but her voice came out breathy. "Not trying to help, trying to distract you." "Why?" "So you'll stop thinking so hard." He was right. She was thinking too hard. Worrying about what she looked like without clothes, about whether she'd disappoint him, about 1,000 things that didn't matter but felt overwhelming anyway. "Raymond?" "Yeah?" "I'm nervous." His hands stilled on her back. Then he turned her around to face him, his expression soft. "We don't have to— No, I want to. I do. I'm just—" She struggled to find the words. "I've never— with anyone. And I don't know if I'll be—" "Perfect," he finished gently. "Martha, I don't need perfect. I need you. Just you." But what if I'm terrible at this? He laughed, soft and affectionate. Then we'll be terrible at it together, and we'll figure it out, same as everything else. He kissed her again, slower this time. Less urgency, more tenderness. His hands went back to the buttons, working them open one by one while he kissed her jaw, her neck, the spot below her ear that made her shiver. By the time he'd worked the dress open enough to slide it off her shoulders, Martha had stopped thinking entirely. The dress pooled at her feet, leaving her in just her shift and borrowed boots. She felt exposed and vulnerable and more desired than she'd ever felt in her life, because Raymond was looking at her like she was something precious. "You're staring," she whispered. "Can't help it." "Raymond, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." He said it simply, like it was just fact. "And I get to spend the rest of my life looking at you. How did I get this lucky?" Tears threatened, and Martha blinked them back fiercely. "Stop making me cry." "Can't promise that either." He stripped off his own clothes with far less ceremony, jacket, vest, shirt, all hitting the floor in rapid succession. Martha tried not to stare at the expanse of his chest, at the muscles earned from years of hard ranch work, but failed completely. "Now who's staring?" he teased. "Shut up." He laughed and pulled her toward the bed. What happened next was messy and awkward, and nothing like the romance novels Martha had secretly read made it sound. There were elbows in wrong places and uncertain hands and moments where they both stopped to laugh at their own fumbling. But it was also tender, patient, full of whispered questions and gentle reassurances. Raymond took his time, made sure she was comfortable, checked in so many times that Martha finally grabbed his face and kissed him just to make him stop asking if she was okay. "I'm okay," she said against his mouth. "I'm more than okay. I'm happy." And she was. Deliriously, impossibly happy. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the sheets, both of them breathing hard, both of them grinning like idiots. "That was," Martha started. "Yeah. We're going to get better at this, right?" Raymond laughed so hard the bed shook. "We'd better. Otherwise, I'm going to embarrass myself every single time." She smacked his chest lightly. "You did not embarrass yourself." "Didn't I?" "No." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him properly. "It was perfect." Liar. "It was perfect because it was us," she insisted. "Messy and awkward and real. That's what perfect looks like." He pulled her back down against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like he never wanted to let go. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I love you too." They stayed in bed until the rain stopped and the afternoon light started slanting through the windows in long golden rays. Eventually, hunger drove them downstairs where they realized neither of them had thought to stock the kitchen for their first day as a married couple. "We've got eggs," Raymond said, rummaging through the pantry. "And some bread that's only a little stale." "I can work with that." Martha cooked while Raymond sat at the table and watched her, still shirtless, still grinning like he'd won something. "What?" she asked when she caught him staring again. "You're in my kitchen, cooking, wearing my shirt." He gestured at the oversized garment she'd borrowed. "This is the best day of my life." "The ceremony was the best day of your life?" "No, this is right here. You and me and burnt eggs." "These eggs are not burnt. Yet." She threw a dish towel at him. They ate scrambled eggs and toast at the kitchen table as the sun set outside, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. And sitting there in the fading light, wearing borrowed clothes and eating simple food, Martha felt something she'd spent her whole life chasing. She felt like she belonged. The first weeks of marriage were an adjustment neither of them had quite prepared for. Martha woke up every morning in that big bed and spent the first few minutes in a state of disbelief. This was real. She really lived here. Raymond really wanted her here. Some mornings he was already up, out handling ranch business before dawn. Other mornings he was still beside her, and she'd lie there watching him sleep, studying the lines of his face in the early light. "You're staring again," he'd mumble without opening his eyes. "How do you even know?" "I can feel it." She'd kiss him instead of answering, and they'd waste half the morning tangled up in each other before guilt about work finally drove them out of bed. The ranch demanded constant attention. There were cattle to move, fences to mend, equipment that broke at the worst possible times. Raymond's ranch hands were respectful but wary at first, clearly not sure what to make of the boss's unexpected wife. Martha won them over through their stomachs. She started cooking massive breakfasts and dinners, ringing the bell Raymond had installed to call the hands in from the fields. The first few times they'd shuffled in reluctantly, clearly expecting judgment or awkwardness. But Martha just loaded their plates and told them to eat before it got cold. By the end of the first month, they were showing up early and staying late, and more than one had told Raymond privately that he'd married a damn fine woman. Not everything was smooth. Martha struggled with feeling useful. Back at her farm, she'd always had work, sewing orders, chickens to tend, endless repairs. Here, the ranch ran like a well-oiled machine even without her. Raymond had been managing fine on his own for years. She tried to carve out her own space, started a garden behind the house, larger and more ambitious than the one she'd kept before. Took over the mending for all the ranch hands, refusing payment but accepting their gratitude. Reorganized the kitchen until it felt like hers. But some days she still felt like a guest in someone else's life. "What's wrong?" Raymond asked one evening, finding her standing at the kitchen window, staring out at nothing. "Nothing." "Martha," she sighed, "do you ever regret it? Marrying me?" He looked genuinely shocked. "What? No, why would you even—" "Because I'm not contributing anything. You were fine before I got here. The ranch ran fine. You didn't need me." Raymond crossed to her, turned her to face him. "I didn't need you to make the ranch run better. I needed you because coming home to an empty house was killing me. Because eating alone every night made me want to sell everything and disappear. Because you make me happy, Martha. That's what you contribute. Happiness. That doesn't feel like enough. It's everything." She wanted to believe him, tried to believe him. But the doubt lingered, especially when she rode into town and saw the looks people still gave her. The whispers that followed her through the general store. Clara Peterson's poisonous smiles. One afternoon, she overheard two women talking while she waited for her order at the dry goods store. "I give it a year," one of them said. "Maybe less. He'll realize what a mistake he made." She's probably already driving him crazy. Can you imagine? That much woman in your house all the time? They laughed, sharp and cruel. Martha stood frozen, her order forgotten, shame burning through her. She made it outside before the tears started, stood in the alley beside the store, trying to breathe through the panic clawing at her chest. What if they were right? What if Raymond did get tired of her? What if— "Mrs. Hale?" She looked up to find Ann Porter standing there, concern written across her face. "Are you all right?" "Fine," Martha managed. "Just needed some air." Ann glanced toward the store, then back at Martha. "You heard them." It wasn't a question. Martha nodded, not trusting her voice. Ann's expression hardened. "Those women are miserable. They've been miserable their whole lives, and they can't stand to see anyone else happy. Don't give them that power." "What if they're right, though? What if Raymond does— Has he given you any reason to think that?" "No, but—" "Then they're not right. They're just cruel." Ann stepped closer. "Martha, I know we're not close. I know I don't have any right to give you advice. But I've seen the way Raymond looks at you. My own husband doesn't look at me like that. And we've been married 5 years. What you two have, it's real. Don't let bitter people convince you otherwise." Martha's throat tightened. "Thank you. Come on, let's get your order and get out of here before you have to hear any more garbage." They walked back into the store together, and Ann made a point of greeting Martha loudly enough for the gossips to hear, asking about the ranch and telling Martha she looked wonderful. It was a small kindness, but it mattered. That night, Martha told Raymond what happened. She expected anger, expected him to want to ride into town and confront someone. Instead, he just pulled her into his lap and held her. "They're going to keep talking," he said quietly. "Some people will never accept us, and I can't make that stop, much as I want to." "I know, but I can tell you this. Every single day for the rest of our lives, I'm going to choose you. I'm going to love you. And eventually, maybe not today or next month or even next year, but eventually you're going to believe that you deserve it. I'm trying. I know you are." He kissed her temple. "And I'm going to be right here while you figure it out." 2 months into the marriage, Martha discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, her monthly hadn't come, and she'd been nauseous in the mornings. But she'd been too afraid to hope, too afraid to say it out loud in case she was wrong. When she finally worked up the courage to see the doctor in town, he confirmed it with a smile. Congratulations, Mrs. Hale. You're going to be a mother. Martha sat in the doctor's office, hands pressed to her still flat stomach, and felt the world tilt sideways. A baby. She was going to have Raymond's baby. The fear hit first, overwhelming, paralyzing fear. What if she was a terrible mother? What if something went wrong? What if the pregnancy was too hard on her body? What if the baby took after her, grew up big and different, had to face the same cruelty she had? But underneath the fear was something else. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. She was going to have Raymond's baby. She waited until that evening to tell him, when the ranch work was done and they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. Raymond? I have something to tell you. He looked at her, and whatever he saw in her face made him sit up straighter. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think anything's wrong, but She took a breath. I'm pregnant. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then his face split into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. You're pregnant? She nodded. We're having a baby? Yes. He let out a whoop that probably scared the cattle in the far pasture and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around right there on the porch. Raymond, put me down! We're having a baby. He set her down but kept his hands on her waist, his eyes bright. Martha, we're having a baby. I know, I was there when it happened. He laughed and kissed her, hard and joyful and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, he rested his hand gently on her stomach. How are you feeling? Are you sick? Do you need anything? Should you be sitting down? Raymond, I'm fine. I'm barely 2 months along. Still, you should rest. Let me do the heavy work. I've been doing heavy work my whole life. I'm not made of glass. But the baby. The baby will be fine. Women have been having babies and working through it since the beginning of time. But she was secretly pleased by his concern, by the way he couldn't stop touching her stomach even though there was nothing to feel yet, by the way he looked at her like she'd just performed a miracle. That night, lying in bed with Raymond's hand still resting protectively on her belly, Martha let herself imagine it. A child. Their child. Running through these fields. Learning to ride. Growing up surrounded by love instead of judgment. She pressed her hand over Raymond's and held on tight. Maybe those bitter women in town had been wrong about more than just her marriage. Maybe happy endings were possible after all. The pregnancy changed everything and nothing all at once. Raymond became impossibly protective, hovering around Martha like she might shatter if he looked away. He tried to take over all the heavy work, insisted she rest more, and nearly had a fit when he caught her carrying a basket of wet laundry to the clothesline. What are you doing? He demanded, taking the basket from her hands. Laundry. Same as I've done every week for the past 20 years. Not anymore. That's too heavy. Raymond, it's wet clothes, not bricks. I don't care, you shouldn't be lifting anything. She loved him for it and wanted to strangle him for it. I'm pregnant, not dying, she said for what felt like the 100th time. Women work through this all the time. My mother worked right up until the day I was born. Your mother also died young, Raymond said quietly. The words hung between them, sharp and painful. Martha's throat tightened. That was fever, not pregnancy. I know, but I can't. He set the basket down and pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her carefully, like she was something fragile. I can't lose you, Martha. I won't survive it. She softened against him, her anger dissolving. You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I'm stubborn, remember? Too stubborn to die. He didn't laugh, just held her tighter. The first few months were hard in ways Martha hadn't anticipated. The morning sickness hit her like a freight train, leaving her hunched over a basin every morning while Raymond held her hair back and murmured useless reassurances. I hate this, she gasped between bouts of nausea. I know. This is your fault. I know that too. I'm never letting you touch me again. Yes, you are. She would have argued, but another wave hit and she couldn't do anything but survive it. The sickness eventually passed, replaced by an exhaustion so profound that Martha sometimes fell asleep mid-conversation. Raymond would find her dozing in the kitchen, at the sewing table, once even standing up against the doorframe. Come on, he'd say gently, scooping her up and carrying her to bed. You need to rest. I was resting, lying down. in an actual bed. That seems excessive. But she never fought him on it. Just let him tuck her in and fell asleep before he'd even left the room. By the 4th month, things started to settle. The sickness faded. The exhaustion lifted slightly, and Martha's body began to change in ways that made the pregnancy impossible to hide. Her belly rounded out, pressing against her dresses until none of them fit properly anymore. Her breasts grew heavy and tender. Her face filled out, making her look even rounder than before. She studied herself in the mirror one morning and felt all the old shame come rushing back. She'd always been big, but now she was bigger, undeniably, obviously bigger. What if Raymond stopped finding her attractive? What if he looked at her growing body and felt repulsed? "You're beautiful," he said that night, running his hand over the curve of her stomach. "I'm huge." "You're growing our baby. That's not huge. That's incredible." "Raymond, I mean it." He shifted so he could look at her properly. "You've never been more beautiful to me than you are right now." "You're lying." "I'm not." He cupped her face, forced her to meet his eyes. "Martha, you're carrying our child. You're creating life. How could I see that as anything but beautiful?" She wanted to believe him, tried to believe him, but the doubts crept in anyway, especially when they went to town and she saw the stares, heard the whispers. "Look how big she's gotten. Poor Raymond. That baby's going to be massive. Probably shouldn't have married a woman that size." What did he expect? Martha kept her head down and tried to ignore them, but it was hard. So hard. One afternoon, she was at the general store when Clara Peterson cornered her by the fabric section. "Martha," Clara said with that fake sweet smile, "how are you feeling? You look tired." "I'm fine, thank you." "Are you sure? Because I heard from Mrs. Brennan, who heard from the doctor's wife, that you've been having a difficult time. All that sickness and exhaustion. It must be so hard on your body." Martha's jaw tightened. "I'm managing." "Of course you are. It's just—" Clara leaned in conspiratorially. "Some women aren't built for this, you know. And with your size, well, there are risks, complications. I do hope you're being careful." It took everything in Martha not to slap her. "Thank you for your concern," she said through gritted teeth. "But I'm perfectly healthy. The doctor said so." "Well, if you say so." Clara's smile sharpened. "I just hope Raymond knows what he's gotten himself into, taking care of you and a baby. That's a lot for one man." Martha left the store without buying anything, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the reins on the wagon ride home. When she told Raymond about it later, after she'd stopped crying, after she'd scrubbed her face and tried to compose herself, his expression went dark. "I'm going to talk to her," he said, already heading for the door. "No." Martha caught his arm. "Don't. It'll just make it worse." "She can't talk to you like that." "She can, and she will, and there's nothing you can do to stop her." Martha pulled him back, her voice breaking. "Please, Raymond, just let it go." He looked torn, angry and helpless all at once. Finally, he pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried against his chest. "I hate this," she said. "I hate that they make me feel like this. Like I'm doing something wrong just by existing." "You're not doing anything wrong." "Then why does it feel like I am?" He didn't have an answer for that. The pregnancy progressed through summer and into fall. Martha's belly grew larger, making simple tasks increasingly difficult. She couldn't bend over to tie her boots, couldn't sleep comfortably no matter how many pillows Raymond arranged around her, couldn't walk more than a few minutes without her back aching. "I'm useless," she complained one evening, struggling to get out of a chair. Raymond helped her up. "You're growing a human being. That's the opposite of useless. I can't do anything anymore." "You cooked dinner for 8 ranch hands tonight." "Barely, and I had to sit down 3 times." "Martha." He turned her to face him. "You're being too hard on yourself." "Am I? Because I feel like a burden, like you're having to take care of me instead of the other way around." Taking care of each other is the whole point. It's not one-sided. She wanted to argue, but her back spasmed and she gasped, pressing a hand to her lower spine. Raymond's face went pale. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, just the baby. Feels like it's sitting on every nerve I have." He guided her to the sofa, helped her lie down, and started massaging her back with those strong, careful hands. "Better?" he asked after a few minutes. "Much." She closed her eyes, finally relaxing. You're too good to me. Not possible. They had their first real fight in October. It started over something stupid. Raymond wanting to hire a woman from town to help around the house, and Martha refusing because she didn't need help, she could manage fine on her own. You're 7 months pregnant, Raymond said, his patience clearly wearing thin. You can't keep doing everything yourself. I've been doing everything myself my entire life. Well, you don't have to anymore. That's the whole point of being married. The point of being married is for you to treat me like I'm incapable? That's not what I'm doing, isn't it? You want to hire someone because you don't think I can handle it. Raymond's jaw clenched. I want to hire someone because I'm worried about you, because you're exhausted and in pain and too damn stubborn to admit you need help. I don't need help. Yes, you do. His voice rose, frustration finally breaking through. And there's nothing wrong with that, Martha. Why can't you see that? Because if I need help, then what good am I? The words burst out of her before she could stop them. If I can't even keep house and cook meals, then what am I contributing? What's the point of me being here? Raymond stared at her, shock and hurt warring across his face. Is that really what you think? He asked quietly. That your only value is in what you can do for me? Martha's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what else I have to offer. How about yourself? How about the fact that I love you? That coming home to you every day makes me happy in a way nothing else ever has. He crossed to her, his voice softening. Martha, I didn't marry you to get a housekeeper. I married you because I love you. And if we never had another hot meal or clean shirt, I'd still choose you every single day. She broke then, sobbing into his chest while he held her. I'm sorry, she gasped. I'm sorry. I don't know why It's okay. We're okay. I just feel so useless. You're not. You're growing our baby. You're building our family. That's everything, Martha. Everything. They hired Mrs. Chen's daughter-in-law, May, to help 3 days a week. Martha hated it at first, hated having someone else in her kitchen, someone else doing the work she'd always done. But May was quiet and efficient and never made Martha feel inadequate. She just did the heavy work without comment, leaving Martha to do the things she could still manage. And slowly, Martha learned to accept it, learned that accepting help didn't make her weak, that she could rest without guilt, that Raymond loved her whether she cooked every meal or not. The baby kicked for the first time in late October. Martha was washing dishes when she felt it, a flutter, like butterfly wings against the inside of her belly. She froze, hands still in the soapy water, waiting. There it was again. Stronger this time. Raymond, she called. He came running from outside, tracking mud across the clean floor. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. The baby... Give me your hand. She pressed his palm to her stomach and waited. The baby kicked again, hard enough that Raymond's eyes went wide. Was that? That's our baby. He stared at her stomach like he'd just witnessed a miracle. Then he dropped to his knees, pressing both hands to her belly, his face level with the growing bump. Hey there, he said softly. I'm your daddy, and I already love you more than I thought possible. The baby kicked again, right under his hand, and Raymond laughed, pure, joyful, and slightly choked with tears. Martha ran her fingers through his hair and felt her heart swell so large she thought it might crack her ribs. This was her family, this impossible, wonderful family she'd never thought she'd have. November brought the first real cold snap, and with it came new challenges. Martha's ankles swelled until her boots wouldn't fit. Her fingers were so puffy she had to take off her wedding ring. The baby seemed to push on her bladder constantly, making sleep nearly impossible. She was miserable and cranky and took it out on Raymond more than she should have. I'm sorry, she said one night after snapping at him for the third time in an hour. I don't mean to be awful. You're not awful. You're uncomfortable. He helped her settle into bed, arranging pillows until she was as comfortable as she could get. Only a couple more months. That feels like forever. I know. She grabbed his hand before he could leave. Do you ever regret it, getting me pregnant? Never. Even when I'm like this? Especially when you're like this. He kissed her forehead. Because it means we're almost there. Almost a family. We're already a family. A bigger family then. The baby came early. Martha woke on a December morning to wetness between her legs and pain radiating through her lower back. For a moment, she thought she'd wet herself, embarrassing but not uncommon in late pregnancy. Then the first real contraction hit, and she knew. "Raymond," she said, shaking his shoulder. "Raymond, wake up." He jolted awake. "What's wrong?" "The baby's coming." He went white. "Now?" "Yes, now." He scrambled out of bed, pulling on clothes with shaking hands. "But it's too early. You've got 3 weeks left." "Tell that to the baby." Another contraction gripped her, stronger this time, and she gasped. Raymond was out the door before she could say anything else, running to wake one of the ranch hands to fetch the doctor and Mrs. Chen, who'd agreed to help with the birth. Martha tried to stay calm. Women had babies every day. Her mother had done this. Millions of women throughout history had done this. But fear coiled in her stomach anyway, cold and sharp. What if something went wrong? What if the baby was too early? What if she wasn't strong enough? Raymond came back, pulled a chair next to the bed, and took her hand. "Doctor's coming. Mrs. Chen, too. They'll be here soon." "What if they're not fast enough? Then we'll figure it out." He brought her hand to his lips. "But they will be. It's going to be fine." The contractions came faster, harder, each one stealing her breath. Mrs. Chen arrived first, bustling in with her medical bag and an air of calm authority that made Martha feel slightly better. "How far apart?" she asked, already rolling up her sleeves. 5 minutes, maybe?" Martha gasped. "I don't know. They keep getting closer." "Good. That is normal." Mrs. Chen examined her efficiently. "Baby is coming soon. Maybe few hours." It wasn't a few hours. It was 12. 12 hours of pain that made Martha understand why women scream during childbirth. 12 hours of contractions that felt like her body was tearing itself apart. 12 hours of Raymond holding her hand, wiping her face, telling her she was doing great even when she was cursing him for getting her pregnant in the first place. "I hate you," she gasped at one point. "I know. This is your fault. I know that too. If I live through this, I'm never letting you touch me again. You said that before. I mean it this time." Mrs. Chen checked her again and nodded. "Almost time to push." "I can't," Martha sobbed. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can," Raymond said firmly. "You're the strongest person I know. You can do this." "I'm not strong. I'm—" Another contraction hit, and Mrs. Chen said, "Push now." Martha pushed and pushed and pushed until she thought she might actually die from the effort. "Head is coming," Mrs. Chen announced. "One more big push." Martha bore down with everything she had, feeling something give, feeling pressure and pain, and then a cry. Thin and reedy, and the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. "It's a girl," Mrs. Chen said, placing the tiny bloody baby on Martha's chest. "You have daughter." Martha stared down at the wrinkled, screaming infant and felt her entire world shift on its axis. A daughter. They had a daughter. Raymond was crying openly, his hand gentle on the baby's back. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Martha, she's perfect." The baby had a full head of dark hair and lungs that worked impressively well. She was smaller than Martha expected, but healthy, her tiny fingers grasping at air. "Hello," Martha said softly, tears streaming down her face. "Hello, little one." The baby quieted it, her voice blinking up at her with unfocused eyes. And just like that, Martha fell in love all over again. They named her Sarah after Raymond's mother. The first weeks were brutal. Sarah cried constantly, day and night, only settling when Martha nursed her, or Raymond walked her around the house singing off-key songs. Martha was exhausted in a way she'd never experienced. Bone-deep exhaustion that made her cry over spilled milk and snap at Raymond for breathing too loudly. "I'm a terrible mother," she said one night, rocking a screaming Sarah at 3 a.m. "You're not," Raymond said from the doorway. "She won't stop crying. I don't know what she needs." "She's a baby. They cry. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong." "Then why does it feel like I am?" He took Sarah from her arms, gave Martha a gentle push toward the bed. "Sleep. I've got her." "Raymond, you have to work in 3 hours." "I've worked on less sleep. Go. Rest." She was too tired to argue. The days blurred together, feeding, changing, trying to sleep when Sarah slept, which was never enough. Martha's body ached from the birth, her breasts hurt from nursing, and she hadn't had a full night's sleep in what felt like years. But there were moments. Small, perfect moments that made everything worth it. Sarah's tiny hand wrapped around Martha's finger, the way she made little contented sounds while nursing. The first time she smiled, actually smiled, not just gas like Mrs. Chen claimed. Raymond was completely besotted. He'd hold Sarah for hours, just staring at her like she was the most fascinating thing in the world. He changed diapers without complaint, walked her when she was fussy, sang to her in that rough, off-key voice that somehow always settled her. "You're good at this," Martha said one evening, watching him rock Sarah to sleep. "At what?" "Being a father." He looked down at their daughter, his expression soft. "She makes it easy." 3 months after Sarah was born, Martha stood in front of the mirror examining her post-pregnancy body. She'd hoped she might shrink back down, return to something close to what she'd been before. But if anything, she was bigger now. Her stomach was soft and loose, marked with stretch marks that looked like lightning strikes across her skin. Her breasts were heavy and full of milk. Her thighs had spread. Her face was rounder. She looked like what she was, a woman who'd grown and birthed a baby. And she hated it. "What are you doing?" Raymond asked, coming into the bedroom. "Nothing." She grabbed her dress, tried to cover herself. He caught her hand. "Martha, I look awful." "No, you don't." "Yes, I do. Look at me. I'm even bigger than before. These marks won't go away. My stomach is..." "Beautiful," he interrupted. "Your stomach is beautiful. Those marks are from growing our daughter. Your body did something incredible, Martha. Why can't you see that?" "Because everyone else sees something else. They see someone who's too big, too much, not good enough." Raymond pulled her against him, his hands gentle on her back. "I don't care what everyone else sees. I see my wife, the mother of my child, the woman I love more than anything in this world. Even like this? Especially like this." He tilted her face up, made her look at him. "You gave me Sarah. You gave me a family. How could I see you as anything but beautiful?" She wanted to believe him, tried to, but the doubts lingered. Until the day Clara Peterson came to the ranch. Martha was outside hanging laundry while Sarah napped inside. She heard the wagon before she saw it, and her stomach sank when Clara climbed down. "Martha," Clara said with that poisonous smile, "I hope I'm not interrupting. What do you want, Clara?" "I just wanted to see how you were doing. I heard you had the baby. A girl, right?" "Yes." "How lovely." Clara's eyes traveled over Martha's still swollen body, and her smile sharpened. "Motherhood suits you. You look like a mother." It was an insult wrapped in false kindness, and they both knew it. "Was there something you needed?" Martha asked coldly. "Actually, yes. I wanted to speak with Raymond. Is he here?" "He's working. You can come back another time." "Oh, I don't mind waiting." Clara settled herself on the porch steps like she owned the place. "We can catch up while I do." Martha was about to tell her to leave when Sarah's cry came from inside the house. "Excuse me," she said, heading for the door. But Clara followed her inside, uninvited. Martha scooped up Sarah, who immediately stopped crying and nuzzled against her chest. "She's small," Clara observed. "Is she eating enough?" "She's perfectly healthy." "If you say so. It's just that with your size, I'd have expected a bigger baby. Makes you wonder if something's wrong." "Get out." Clara blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said get out." Martha's voice was steady, cold. "Get out of my house and don't come back." "I was just trying to help." "No, you weren't. You came here to be cruel, to try to make me feel small. But I'm done, Clara. I'm done letting people like you make me hate myself, so get out, now." Clara's face went red. "How dare you!" "Out!" Clara left in a huff, and Martha stood in her kitchen, holding her daughter, shaking from head to toe. But not from fear, from power. She'd stood up for herself. Actually stood up for herself. When Raymond came home that evening and she told him what happened, he laughed so hard he had to sit down. "I wish I'd been there to see her face," he said. "She's going to tell everyone in town." "Good. Let her. Maybe they'll finally learn to leave you alone." That night, lying in bed with Sarah sleeping in her cradle nearby and Raymond's arm around her waist, Martha felt something shift. She looked down at her body, still big, still marked by pregnancy, still not what society said she should be. But Raymond's hand was splayed across her soft stomach like it belonged there. Sarah was sleeping peacefully nearby, healthy and loved. And Martha was happy. Actually, genuinely happy. For the first time in her life, she stopped trying to be smaller, stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped believing that her worth was measured by other people's approval. She was Raymond Hale's wife, Sarah's mother, a woman who'd survived everything life had thrown at her and come out stronger. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Sarah was 2 years old when the second baby came. Martha found out on a morning when she was chasing her daughter through the kitchen, trying to keep her from feeding breakfast to the dog. The exhaustion hit her first, that familiar bone-deep weariness she remembered from the first pregnancy. Then came the nausea. "Not again," she muttered, leaning against the counter while Sarah dumped oatmeal on the floor. But when she told Raymond that evening, he picked her up and spun her around just like the first time, nearly knocking over a chair in the process. "We're having another baby. Put me down before you drop me. I'm not going to drop you." But he set her down anyway, grinning like a fool. Sarah's going to be a big sister. She's going to terrorize that poor baby. Have you seen how she treats her dolls? She'll be great. He was right, though it took time. Sarah was initially furious about the new baby, a boy they named James, and spent the first month trying to give him back. But eventually she warmed to her little brother, even if her version of helping mostly involved trying to feed him things he couldn't eat and singing to him at volumes that made him cry. The ranch grew along with their family. Raymond expanded the herd, hired more hands, built a new barn. Martha's garden flourished, providing vegetables for their table and enough extra to sell in town. She'd started baking bread to sell too, and before long half the county was buying from her. Money was still tight some months, easier others. There were bad years when the cattle got sick or the drought hit hard. Good years when everything seemed to go right. But they managed. Always managed. By the time Sarah was 5 and James was 3, Martha had settled into her role in ways she never expected. She wasn't just Raymond's wife anymore. She was a mother, a baker, a businesswoman in her own right. She was known throughout Harlan County not as that big woman Raymond Hale married, but as Martha Hale, the woman who made the best bread in Texas and raised her children with a firm hand and a kind heart. The town changed too, slowly. Some people never came around. Clara Peterson still sneered when they passed on the street, and Mrs. Brennan still whispered behind her hand. But others softened. Young couples started coming to Martha for advice about marriage and babies. Women showed up at her door asking for recipes. The ranch hands' wives sought her out at church socials, treating her like one of them instead of an outsider. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. One afternoon when Sarah was 6, Martha found her daughter crying behind the barn. "What's wrong, baby?" Sarah looked up with tear-streaked cheeks. "Amy Peterson said I'm too fat. She said I look just like you and that's why nobody will ever marry me." The words hit Martha like a fist to the chest. She'd known this day would come, known that eventually her children would face the same cruelty she had, but knowing it and experiencing it were different things. She sat down in the dirt next to Sarah and pulled her close. "Amy Peterson is a mean little girl who learned to be mean from her mean mother," Martha said. "And you know what? She's wrong. But I am big like you. So what? Being big doesn't make you less worthy of love. It doesn't make you less beautiful or less deserving of good things." Martha tilted Sarah's face up. "Your daddy chose me. Not because I was small or because I fit some idea of what I was supposed to look like. He chose me because of who I am, and someday someone is going to choose you for exactly the same reason. But what if nobody does? Then you choose yourself. You build a life you love, with or without someone else. You don't wait around for permission to be happy." Martha brushed the tears from Sarah's cheeks. "Besides, you're 6 years old. You've got plenty of time to worry about getting married." Sarah nodded, but Martha could see the doubt lingering in her daughter's eyes. She recognized it because she'd worn that same expression for years. That night, Martha told Raymond what happened. "I'll talk to Sarah," he said immediately. "You should. But Raymond, what if it doesn't help? What if she grows up hating herself the way I did?" Then we keep telling her she's loved until she believes it. Same way I did with you. He pulled her close. It took you a while to believe me, but you got there eventually. Did I? He pulled back to look at her. Did you? Martha thought about it, really thought about it. She looked down at her body, still big, still marked by 2 pregnancies, still not what magazines and society said a woman should be. But it was strong. It had carried 2 babies, worked this ranch, built a life. And Raymond loved it, loved her, completely and without reservation. Yeah, she said finally. I think I did. He smiled and kissed her forehead. Good. Now let's make sure our daughter gets there faster than you did. They made a point of it after that. Both of them. Telling Sarah she was beautiful, strong, capable. Never commenting on her size or making her feel like she needed to be smaller. Praising her for her kindness, her creativity, her fierce determination. It wasn't perfect. Sarah still had hard days, still came home crying sometimes. But she had parents who loved her exactly as she was, and that made all the difference. James, mercifully, seemed to escape the worst of it. He was a skinny, energetic kid who climbed everything and fell off most of it. The worst anyone said about him was that he was wild, which was true. When Sarah was 8 and James was 6, Martha got pregnant again. Are you kidding me? She said when the doctor confirmed it. Raymond just laughed. 3rd time's the charm. We can barely handle the 2 we have. We'll manage. We always do. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. Martha was older now, 38, and her body protested every step of the way. The exhaustion was worse. The sickness lasted longer, and by the 7th month she was so swollen she could barely walk. I'm never doing this again, she told Raymond one night. You said that last time. I mean it this time. You said that too. Raymond, I swear, up it. He kissed her, cutting off whatever threat she was about to make. I know. And after this one, I'll leave you alone. Promise? Promise. The baby, another girl they named Mary, came early and small, barely 6 pounds. The doctor was worried at first, but Mary proved to be tougher than she looked. She screamed like her lungs were twice their actual size and latched onto Martha's breast with a determination that left bruises. She's going to be trouble, Mrs. Chen predicted, examining the baby with approval. All my children are trouble, Martha said tiredly. Good. Makes them strong. At 38 with 3 children, Martha finally stopped caring what anyone thought. She was too busy to care, too exhausted to give people's opinions any weight, too focused on keeping her family fed and clothed and loved to worry about whether Mrs. Brennan approved of her dress or Clara Peterson sneered at her in the street. She showed up at church socials in flour-dusted aprons because she'd been baking until the last minute. She nursed Mary in public when the baby was hungry, ignoring the scandalized looks. She laughed too loud and took up space and stopped apologizing for existing. And something interesting happened. People started respecting her. Not everyone. Some folks were determined to hate her until they died. But others, especially the younger women, the ones just starting families, they started seeking her out, asking for advice, treating her like someone worth knowing. You make it look easy, Ann Porter said one afternoon, watching Martha juggle all 3 children while kneading bread dough. It's not easy. It's exhausting and messy, and half the time I have no idea what I'm doing. But you do it anyway. What else am I going to do? Give up? Martha shaped the dough into loaves. Life doesn't stop because it's hard. You just keep going. Anne was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm pregnant. Congratulations. I'm terrified. Martha looked at her, really looked at her. Anne was young, maybe 23, and there was real fear in her eyes. Come here, Martha said, wiping her hands on her apron. Let me tell you something. Being terrified is normal. Being overwhelmed is normal. Thinking you can't do it is normal, but you can. Women have been doing this forever, and we're tougher than we think. What if I'm not tough enough? Then you learn to be. Same way I did. Martha squeezed her hand. And you ask for help when you need it. There's no shame in that. Anne's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. After she left, Raymond came into the kitchen and found Martha staring out the window. What are you thinking about? He asked. How different things are now. Different how? I used to think I'd spend my whole life alone, that nobody would ever want me. That I'd die in that little farmhouse with nothing to show for it except a lifetime of being invisible. She turned to face him. And now look at me. 3 kids, a husband who loves me, women coming to me for advice. It's not the life I imagined. It's better. Raymond crossed to her, wrapped his arms around her from behind. You know what I think? What? I think you were never invisible. People saw you just fine. They just didn't know what to do with someone who didn't fit their narrow little boxes. But you forced them to see you anyway, to make room for you, and that takes more courage than they'll ever have. Martha leaned back against him, feeling the solid warmth of him. When did you get so wise? I married a smart woman. Some of it had to rub off eventually. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and small victories. Sarah grew into a strong-willed teenager who looked more like Martha every day and refused to apologize for it. She got into fights with girls who made fun of her size and came home with split knuckles and fierce pride. Martha scolded her for fighting, but secretly felt proud that her daughter wouldn't be pushed around. James became the kind of boy who brought home injured animals and cried when they didn't survive. He was gentle in ways that worried some of the ranch hands. Too soft for a boy, they whispered. But Raymond shut that down fast. My son is exactly who he's supposed to be, he told them flatly, and if I hear anyone suggesting otherwise, they can find work elsewhere. Mary was the wild one. By age 5, she was climbing trees that made Martha's heart stop and riding horses that should have been too big for her. She had Martha's determination and Raymond's fearlessness, and the combination was terrifying. The ranch prospered. Raymond expanded again, buying the neighboring property when old Mr. Peterson died and his widow moved to live with her daughter in Dallas. Clara Peterson came to collect her mother's things and didn't say a single word to Martha, just loaded up the wagon and left. Martha watched her go and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no bitterness, just indifference. That's when she knew she'd really moved on. When Martha was 45 and Raymond was 51, he had a scare. He collapsed in the barn one afternoon, clutching his chest. The ranch hands carried him to the house while someone rode for the doctor, and Martha stood frozen in the kitchen, watching her husband's face go gray, and felt her entire world tilt. Not Raymond. She couldn't lose Raymond. The doctor came and examined him while Martha paced outside the bedroom, Sarah holding her hand and the younger kids crying in the kitchen. It's not his heart, the doctor said finally, coming out. At least, I don't think so. Probably exhaustion and heat. But he needs to slow down, Martha. He's not a young man anymore. He's 51. That's not old. It is when you're working like you're 25. The doctor packed his bag. Make him rest. Actually rest, not his version of it. Making Raymond rest was like trying to fence the wind. He lasted 3 days in bed before he was trying to sneak out to check on the cattle. Absolutely not, Martha said, blocking the door. I'm fine. You collapsed. You're not fine. The doctor said it wasn't my heart. The doctor said to rest, so rest. They argued about it for a week. Raymond insisted he was needed. Martha insisted he had ranch hands for a reason. Eventually, they compromised. He could supervise from the porch, but no heavy work. It made him irritable and difficult to live with. He snapped at the kids, complained about everything, and drove Martha half crazy with his restlessness. One night, she found him sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the dark fields. Can't sleep? She asked, sitting down beside him. Thinking. About? About dying, leaving you alone, leaving the kids without a father. Martha's chest tightened. You're not dying. Not today, but someday. He looked at her, and in the moonlight she could see the fear in his eyes. And I hate the thought of you having to manage everything alone. I won't be alone. I'll have the kids, the ranch hands, Mrs. Chen. She took his hand. And I managed before I met you, remember? I'm tougher than I look. I know you are, but I don't want you to have to be that tough again. She squeezed his hand. Raymond Hale, you listen to me. You're not allowed to die for at least another 30 years. I didn't put up with all your nonsense just to lose you now. He laughed, soft and surprised. 30 years? Minimum. I'm planning to be an insufferable old woman, and I need you there to be insufferable with me. Deal. He did slow down after that. Let the ranch hands handle more. Spent more time with the kids. Started taking afternoons off to sit with Martha on the porch. both of them watching their children play in the fields they'd built together. When Sarah was 17, she fell in love with a ranch hand named Thomas Miller. He was a good kid, quiet, hardworking, respectful, but Martha still found herself watching him like a hawk, looking for any sign that he might hurt her daughter. "You're being overprotective," Raymond said one evening. "I'm being appropriately protective. He's a good boy." They all seemed good at first. I seemed good at first. Martha looked at him. "You were different." "How?" "You saw me when nobody else did. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable." She turned back to watch Sarah and Thomas walking by the barn, hands clasped. "I just want to make sure he sees her the same way." A month later, Thomas came to them asking permission to marry Sarah. He was nervous, stammering through the request while wringing his hat in his hands. "I love her, sir, ma'am. I know I don't have much, just my wages and what I've saved, but I'll work hard. I'll take care of her. "Do you know what you're getting into?" Martha interrupted. Thomas blinked. "Ma'am? My daughter is stubborn. She's opinionated. She doesn't take orders well, and she'll call you on your nonsense every single time. She's going to be a handful." "I know, ma'am. That's why I love her." Martha and Raymond exchanged glances. "Well," Raymond said, fighting a smile, "I suppose if you know what you're getting into." They married that spring in the same church where Martha and Raymond had married 18 years earlier. Sarah wore a dress Martha made, walked down the aisle with her head high, and said her vows in a clear, strong voice that made Martha cry. After the ceremony, Sarah pulled Martha aside. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For teaching me I didn't have to be small to deserve love, for showing me what a good marriage looks like." Sarah hugged her tight. "For being exactly who you are." Martha held her daughter and thought about that scared, lonely woman who'd lived in a falling-apart farmhouse all those years ago. The woman who thought she'd never be loved, never have a family, never matter to anyone. That woman would never have believed this was possible. James left for college when he turned 18, planning to become a veterinarian. Mary was only 12, but already talking about joining him someday, studying to be a doctor. "Both our kids leaving for school," Raymond said one night. "We're getting old." "We got old years ago. We're just now noticing." He laughed and pulled her close. They were sitting on the porch swing he'd built the year Mary was born, watching the sun set over fields that stretched farther than they had 20 years ago. "You know what I was thinking today?" Raymond said. "What?" "That I'm glad the dance was raining that night." Martha smiled. "What dance?" "Our wedding. You were so worried about the rain. But if it hadn't been raining, maybe fewer people would have shown up. Maybe it wouldn't have felt as intimate as ours. Or maybe it would have been exactly the same. Maybe." He kissed the top of her head. "Either way, I'd do it all again, every single moment. Even the parts where I was impossible? Especially those parts. They reminded me you were real." Martha settled against him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. She thought about everything they'd built together, the children they'd raised, the life they'd carved out of nothing but determination and love. It hadn't been perfect. There'd been hard years and harder days, moments when she'd been certain they wouldn't make it. Times when the weight of other people's judgment had nearly crushed her. But they'd survived it all, more than survived. They'd thrived. And somewhere along the way, Martha had stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, stopped expecting Raymond to wake up and realize he'd made a mistake, stopped believing that happiness was something she had to earn rather than something she deserved. She'd learned that love wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real, about showing up every day, even when it was hard, about choosing each other over and over again. She'd learned that her worth wasn't determined by her size or what small-minded people thought of her, that she could take up space without apology, that being herself, fully, completely herself, was not just enough. It was everything. "What are you thinking about?" Raymond asked. "How lucky I am." "We're both lucky." "No." She turned to look at him. "I'm luckier, because you taught me how to believe I deserve to be happy, and that's a gift I can never repay. You repay it every day just by being here." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "By being you, by loving me even when I'm difficult, by building this life with me." She kissed him, soft and slow, and tasted the years between them, every fight, every laugh, every moment of joy and sorrow and everything in between. When they broke apart, Martha rested her forehead against his and whispered, "I love you. I love you too. Always have. Always will." The sun finished setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. The wind moved through the cedar trees carrying the scent of growing things. And Martha Hale, the woman everyone once mocked, the woman who'd spent years believing she'd never be enough, sat on her porch with her husband's arms around her and knew, finally and completely, that she was home. Not because of the house or the ranch or the land they'd built their life on, but because Raymond was there. Because their children existed. Because she'd learned to love herself the way he'd always loved her. She'd spent so many years trying to become smaller, quieter, less of a burden, trying to fit into boxes that were never meant to hold her. But Raymond had shown her a different way, had taught her that she didn't need to shrink to deserve love, that her size, her strength, her stubborn refusal to disappear, those weren't flaws to overcome. They were part of what made her exactly who she was supposed to be. And who she was supposed to be was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 25 years after their wedding, Martha and Raymond sat in that same spot on the porch, older now, grayer, marked by time, but still together. Sarah had given them 3 grandchildren. James was running his own veterinary practice 2 towns over. Mary was in her final year of medical school, brilliant and fierce and everything Martha had hoped she'd be. The ranch still stood, still thrived. A testament to hard work and determination, and 2 people who'd refused to let the world tell them their love wasn't valid. "We did good, didn't we?" Raymond said one evening. Martha looked out at everything they'd built, the expanded barn, the flourishing fields, the garden that now fed half the county. But more than that, she looked at the life they'd created, the family they'd raised, the love they'd proven was possible even when everyone said it wasn't. "Yeah," she said, taking his hand. "We did real good." And in that moment, Martha understood something she wished she could tell that lonely, scared woman from all those years ago. That being loved wasn't about being perfect. It was about being seen, really seen, and choosing to let yourself be loved anyway. That the right person wouldn't ask you to become smaller. They'd love you for taking up space, for being loud and stubborn and unapologetically yourself. That happiness wasn't something you had to earn or prove you deserved. It was something you could choose, something you could build, something that was yours by right, not by permission. The woman everyone mocked had become the heart of Harlan County. The woman nobody thought deserved love had built a family that would carry her legacy for generations. And the lonely cowboy who'd seen something beautiful in her when nobody else did, he'd been right all along. She was worth everything. And so was their love.